All right, so uh, let's take a deep dive into South Korea. I mean, it's really like a hotbed for business expansion, lots of opportunity there. But there's always a but. South Korean labor laws, they're um, a bit of a maze.
Yeah, they can be pretty complex, especially for companies that are, new to the market.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually going through some material on severance pay. It
Hmm.
really stood out. It's a pretty big deal in South Korea, way more than just a formality.
Oh, absolutely.
Like one of the sources even said that if a company messes up terminations, like doesn't handle it by the book, the Labor Standards Act, the LSA, a court could just toss the whole thing out.
Yeah, that's right. The LSA, it's basically the backbone of employment law in South Korea and terminations. They got to be handled by the book. It's really interesting, though.
What's that?
This focus on severance pay, it shows you like what South Koreans value, job security, making sure people are taken care of.
So it's more than just rules. It's like a whole philosophy.
Exactly. And companies need to get that, especially if they're coming in from, a different culture. It can make all the difference in how they build relationships with their employees.
All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. Severance pay rules.
Mm.
What makes an employee eligible?
So the source we're looking at, it lays out three main things. One, they got to have worked at least a year. Two, at least 15 hours a week. And three, over 60 hours each month. It's really for employees who are, in it for the long haul.
Makes sense. But here's where it gets kind of weird, or at least I thought so. Even if an employee is fired, for a reason, they're still entitled to severance. How does that even work?
It seems counterintuitive, right? But that's where the GWRBA comes in, the Guarantee of Workers' Retirement Benefits Act. It works with the LSA, and together they create the safety net for employees no matter why they leave.
So it's like an acknowledgement of what they put into the company.
Exactly. So how do you actually calculate the severance pay? Seems like a pain.
Yeah, it does.
Actually, the formula itself is not that bad. Average daily salary times 30 days, then you multiply that by the total days they worked, divided by 365. So you're factoring in their daily earnings and how long they've been with the company.
Gotcha. Can you give me like a real world example just to make it crystal clear?
Sure, let's say someone makes, I don't know, 8 million one a month. If they were paying regular income tax, that'd be like 13.8%, right? Comes out to about 11,111,010 But for severance pay, the tax is way lower, only 2.72%. So on 8 million, they'd only pay something like 217,801 in taxes.
Whoa, that's a huge difference. So South Korea really doesn't see severance pay as just income. It's like a whole separate thing.
Exactly. It really shows you how much they prioritize employee security.
We keep talking about continuous service. Our source mentioned that moving someone within the company, that wouldn't break their service. Yeah. What about like military service? That's pretty common in South Korea. Would that reset the clock?
Good question. It comes up a lot. So even long leaves, like for military service, as long as it's, normal practice or required by law, it doesn't affect their severance calculations.
So continuous service really does mean continuous, even with these big breaks. It really reinforces the idea that South Korea values long-term employment.
Yeah, for sure. And it protects employees from losing benefits because of, things they can't control.
Okay, so with all this complexity, it seems like companies need a guide, someone to help them figure out all the ins and outs of employing people in South Korea. So you're talking about INS Global, right?
Yeah.
They help businesses navigate all this tricky international stuff.
Yeah, exactly. For companies trying to break into South Korea, INS Global can be a lifesaver.
And so,
They take care of all those complicated HR things, all the legal stuff. They make sure everything's on the up and up, follows the local rules. So businesses can focus on what they do best, growing their business without getting bogged down in paperwork and regulations.
so they're like a safety net. So businesses can take advantage of South Korea's potential without tripping over legal stuff.
Precisely. They've got things like employer of record and PEO. Basically, they become the legal employer of the company's staff in South Korea. It takes a huge load off businesses that are, new to the market.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears a bit. Besides the legal stuff, what about the human side? What should businesses know about South Korean work culture?
Oh, that's a great point. Knowing the culture is just as important as knowing the laws. One thing that really stands out about South Korea is respect for seniority and hierarchy. It's a big deal in how decisions are made and how teams work together.
So businesses need to understand that hierarchy when they're setting up shop in South Korea.
Absolutely. Being aware of the culture helps build better relationships with employees and avoid misunderstandings.
We talked about equal employment laws earlier. What does that mean in South Korea?
So, on top of the basic labor laws, South Korea has all these regulations about equality in the workplace. They go above and beyond the LSA to prevent discrimination and create a fair work environment.
So it's not just about following the minimum requirements. Businesses need to go the extra mile.
Yeah, it's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected. And that commitment to ethical practices, it can actually make you stand out from the competition.
That's interesting. Investing in ethical practices can actually pay off.
Absolutely. When a company shows it cares about its employees and fairness, it builds trust and loyalty, not just with employees, but with customers too.
Hmm.
That can lead to more productivity, a better reputation, and ultimately more success.
So South Korea is a mix of economic opportunity and social responsibility.
You got it. And businesses that are willing to embrace both, well, they're the ones that will really thrive.
We've covered a lot today, from the details of severance pay to the cultural side of working in South Korea. Expanding into this market takes careful planning and a lot of understanding. So the big question is, how do you balance protecting employees with, actually doing business in a fast-paced market like South Korea? It's like finding that sweet spot, where being socially responsible meets being competitive.
Yeah, it's a tough one. No easy answers there. What we see in South Korea is that they really prioritize worker rights, which is great, ethically speaking, but for businesses, especially ones used to more flexibility, it can be a challenge.
So how do you stay competitive, stay agile when you've got these strong labor standards, adapt without, throwing your values out the window or hurting your bottom line?
I think you got to change your mindset. Don't see compliance as a burden, see it as part of your strategy. Like weave those ethical considerations into how you operate.
And that's where INS Global comes in, right? They don't just give you the rule book, they help you make it part of your company culture.
Right. They help you turn compliance into a strength. When you're operating confidently, ethically, you build trust with your employees, your partners, the whole market. And that trust, that's what leads to real success.
It's funny how this conversation has gone from severance pay to like the philosophy of doing business in South Korea.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that business isn't just about numbers, it's about people. It's about making a positive impact.
I couldn't agree more. That's what makes it so interesting. It's not just knowing the rules, it's knowing the values behind them, figuring out how to make your business reflect those values, seeing compliance as an opportunity, not a restriction, a way to do business better, build a better future, more sustainable, more equitable.
So for our listener, after this deep dive into employment in South Korea, what's the one thing they should take away? What's your advice?
Do your research. Understand the landscape, really get the nuances, and find experts who can guide you. The rewards are there for those willing to put in the work.
Well said. South Korea's got a lot to offer businesses, but it takes a smart, informed approach. And like we've learned, with the right partners, the right attitude, those challenges can become, stepping stones to lasting success. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep. This is the host signing off.